Thank you for listening to the Skylight Books podcast series. Please don't forget to visit our website at skylightbooks.com and make sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Also, don't forget to subscribe to this podcast for more author talks and bookseller conversations. You can find us on Podbean, iTunes, and Spotify. Stay safe and healthy, and we hope to see you back in our store soon.
I see all the lights. I see all the lights. Good night.
Hello, lovely listeners, and welcome back to SKYLIT. This is the Skylight Books podcast series, and I'm your host, Maddie Gobbo. I'm the events manager here at Skylight Books in Los Angeles. Just wanted to say a few words before we bring in our guests for the day. Right now, we are still open 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. on weekdays and 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. on weekends. You may have heard about our new stay-at-home order here in LA County. It does not really change too much about the way we've been doing business because we've had good COVID protocols in place. We're just reducing our store capacity a little bit more, but you can still shop with us. And we definitely encourage you to use curbside pickup if you want to be extra super safe. And we can also do shipping anywhere in the US. So feel free to order whatever you like on our website, skylightbooks.com, and we will get it to you. All right. So today I'm excited because we have a mother and son author duo who have a new book where they interview each other, which is just a fantastic setup for a book. Speaking from my own experience, for my mom's birthday this year, I conducted a series of interviews about her with some of her favorite people, and it was her favorite gift ever. So this is just a beautiful gift that you have given each other, and that our readers can perhaps give to their own moms or sons or daughters or fathers or other relatives that they want to get a little deeper with. So the book is called Believe in You, A Family's Journey of Life, Love, and Loss, and it's by Jared Milrad and Jan West. Hi guys, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for being here.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thanks for being here too.
Well, let me read your bio so our listeners can get to know you a little bit better. So Jared Milrad, JD-MS, is an award-winning filmmaker, entrepreneur, and advocate for social change. As the founder and president of A Show for a Change, a social impact entertainment company, Jared created Movie Karma, the first ever impact streaming platform that connects inspiring films with a charitable call to action. Jared and his team have acquired award-winning films from around the world, including an Oscar-nominated film. With a focus on empowering underrepresented artists, Jared has built relationships with award-winning filmmakers, including Oscar-winning and Oscar-nominated filmmakers, and with leading organizations such as the Sundance Institute, the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, and the Obama Foundation. Jan West is an author, mother, and lifelong advocate for social change. A proud mother of her two sons, Sean and Jared, Jan began her career as a cosmetician and teacher and later worked as a medical billing secretary and caregiver. A longtime animal advocate, Jan has rescued numerous dogs and advocated for a more compassionate society. In her free time, Jan enjoys ballroom dancing, watching classic movies, traveling, and spending time with her family and two rescue dogs, Gabriel and Penelope. Oh, Gabriel and Penelope, they're the real stars here.
They are. I wish they were here.
Well, thank you both for making the time for the podcast today. I'm so happy to have you.
Yeah, we're excited to be here. This is fun.
Lovely to be here.
So I want to start off maybe with a short reading. And since this book is kind of an interview format, I'm going to let you guys both sort of swap back and forth, and then we'll ask you some questions and we'll get into it.
Great. Well, and thanks again for having us. So the book is broken down in really sections of both of our lives. So we kind of wanted to map each of our experiences either together or apart. So one of the sections we wanted to read from is called Dating. And this is a section about my coming out process as a gay man and my 20s. And so I'll just read from that section. And for those following along, depending on what edition you have of the book, it's page 71. My 20s were obviously in a different time and different place than yours. I had a different upbringing. I remember coming out as gay with your urging when I was 22. When I came back home from college, you had read my journal that I wrote while studying abroad in India, where I questioned my sexuality. I came home from college and you said, you should be happy. Don't break a woman's heart. Having that conversation with you propelled me into dating openly and helped me let the world know who I was. So my 20s were adventurous and exciting. It was a second puberty, essentially. A lot of LGBTQ folks can probably relate to that. It was my adventure. There wasn't a sense of guilt or shame. It was a sense of...
I said freedom, which I truly believed.
Exactly. It was the opposite of what you went through. It was a sense of, oh, now I figured it out. Well, of course, there were many guys who I met that were either not really my type or who I kind of settled for in a one-night situation. It was still a very liberating time. Finally, I felt this is who I am. And so that was part of the section. We also wanted to read another small part of it. Do you want to go to page 75? So this is a bit about my mom's experience growing up and dating in the 60s and beyond. So we're talking about that on page 75. There was a revolution underfoot.
That was the whole thing. My mother didn't get that because that wasn't her time. So at 28, I was already dead to her. This was not in the book, but because I hadn't begun married yet.
Right.
So I was not considered to be alive, just dead because I wasn't married.
It's funny because we joke today that in so-called gay years, you're basically dead by the time you're 30.
Really?
Yes, there's a sense in parts of at least the gay male community that being younger is everything.
That's interesting.
And I think it's maybe changing a little bit now as there's a new generation of men in their 30s who are out earlier and might feel less pressure to always be young or look a certain way. But it's still very much a reality that younger is everything, newer is better, and fresher on the scene is the ideal.
Well, that's kind of the same for women. Look, at 77, I'm 78 now, but I'm considered dead. For women at 30 in my years, you hit your stride. Look at the movie industry. Actresses who were 40 really get good parts even today. Like Meryl Streep, Helen Mirren, Judi Dench are just some of the few who get good parts. But basically, by the time you're 40, you're through. That's the way it was. The illusion of youth and beauty only carries you just so far. And the next young hot thing comes up and takes your spot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that was a bit about dating. We talked about a number of other topics as well. But one of the other bits we wanted to highlight was kind of later as we move into talking about marriage. We talked about how I met my husband, Nate, now husband, Nate. And that's on page 86. I thought that I would be married to a woman, at least through my teen years. I just got some picture in my head, probably from being on the planet at that time, of having a wife in an idyllic future. Of course, that's not how it turned out. So by the time I came out at 23, I didn't even consider marriage as a possibility or something that I was even interested in. Of course, I was relatively young when I came out. I was 23. It was only after I had been dating Nate for about 4 years, given the longevity of our relationship, that I started to think about marriage.
When did you meet Nate?
I met him in Boston on Friday, November 7th, 2008, 3 days after the presidential election, when I finished working for President Obama in New Hampshire. In the early days of dating, we were both still wrapping up other relationships. After the campaign, only a few months after we started dating, I couldn't find a job in DC, so I actually moved in with Nate for about a month. I lived in his bedroom literally because I didn't really have a place to be as I was in between jobs. It seems like I'm always in between jobs. But then I moved to Maine to work on a labor union issues campaign, and he came to visit me often. Early on, it was clear there was something different about this particular relationship, but we still had so many rocky moments and ups and downs for the next several years. And I decided to go to law school at Northeastern University in Boston, and he started his career in healthcare instead of continuing to pursue medicine, which was originally why he went to graduate school at Tufts University. So we'd been through a lot even in our first few years together, including long-distance relationships and everything else. But by the time I finished law school and the next presidential election came around, we did another long-distance stint when I was in North Carolina working for President Obama's re-election campaign. By the time that ended, the election was over. It felt like a moment for me. For whatever reason, I began to envision Nate as being the guy that I would be with for the rest of my life. So it was a little different maybe than what you described, in that for me, it just felt like this is the guy. There was a sense of urgency in terms of time and more sense of just, this feels right. I have to propose to this guy. And so I did, of course, on New Year's Eve in 2012.
Yes, and it was beautiful. And the recording of the speech you delivered to him at the Stonewall in Manhattan was just beautiful, very special.
It was. I surprised Nate with some friends, and we called you, and he called his parents. I actually saw Dad that night before I proposed. We got Indian food, and I told him, and he was happy for me. So getting married for me was in a very different time and a very different moment than it was for you. Of course, when I proposed, same-sex marriage was legal in the state of New York, but it wasn't legal in most of the country. And interestingly, in that period after I proposed on New Year's Eve in 2012, and Nate said, quote, "You know the answer," end quote, which evidently, as it turned out, meant yes. Until we got married in 2015, I think Nate needed that period to decide whether getting married to me was really right for him. I think he might have even wanted to recalibrate what marriage meant to him and whether that was part of his future. But by the time we ended up actually getting married on July 19, 2015, same-sex marriage had just been legalized nationally 2 weeks earlier by a landmark decision of the U.S. Supreme Court. As I tend to be, I was pretty spontaneous about it, and Nate was a little bit practical. So our engagement and process of getting married was obviously quite different than yours with Dad.
Right, and your wedding was fantastic. Sitting there watching you exchanging your vows was so beautiful and so special. It didn't matter what your gender is or what your sexual orientation is. What matters is the love and caring, and may you always have that. And the honesty between two people is so important, because if you can't communicate, you are really in trouble. By my watching you both exchange your vows, I thought about how perfect it was. You seem so perfect together. Oh, we know people always have problems. It's going to be true until the end of the human race and maybe beyond. But that's just the part of living. Nothing is perfection. But I was so happy for you. I also wish that your brother would find someone, but we can't mention that at all. I just felt from day one when I met Nate, which was up in Boston, that this was a very special person. And I'm not just saying that. I just felt that. We were standing there with Sandra, my friend, going to see Robin Williams perform his stand-up show. And I just thought, this is a nice guy. You know, when I had met others you had dated, and they all were nice, but I felt something special about Nate. Nate was very special, very sincere.
Mm-hmm. That's true. I wonder what your experience was in the decade plus that you were married to Dad in terms of growing together and changing together. Older couples told us as we were about to get married that the interesting thing about marriage is you change at different times, you mature at different times, and you are in different circumstances in different times in your lives. And somehow each spouse has to navigate that path.
Well, I think that with Marty and I, there was always the elephant in the room, and the elephant was his ex-wife, Judy, and his two kids from that first marriage, Mara and Josh. It was very hard when Sean was a baby. Judy developed breast cancer. Mara and Josh had to come to live with us. And at that point, all I wanted to be was with your father. We were waiting for a 2-bedroom apartment, and I set up a bedroom baby room, and then I had to take in Mara and Josh. I felt sorry for them, but I was so tortured by it. I remember that one day I had to take down all the baby decals, and I was just crying all day. I don't think I've ever cried quite like that since the day when my brother died. My dreams being shattered. We had to move the crib into our bedroom, and Mara and Josh were there for quite some time.
Yeah, so that's a bit about at least the pathway into marriage, and sort of thinking about both of our experiences, being married at very different times in life, but also in society.
Thank you both. I think let's talk a little bit, and then maybe if you have
Sure.
another reading, we can
Yeah.
have that bookend at the end.
Yeah.
So I'm so curious whose idea this was and how it all kind of came together.
Yeah, so I think it was my idea.
It was your idea. Yes.
But my mom and I, as you can tell, have a really close relationship. I mean, she was a single mother raising me for most of my childhood, and
your brother.
and my
don't
brother.
forget him.
Yeah, she raised my brother too, I guess. But no, I think it was my idea. My mom moved out to California from Florida, where she was. I guess about three years ago.
Yes.
And so just being closer to her and really valuing that time with her, I think was part of what prompted me to think about it. I'd also read Anderson Cooper's book that he wrote a few years ago with his mom. I think actually close before she passed. And I just thought that was such a beautiful way to honor that relationship, knowing how close he was with his mother. And so that's kind of what prompted it.
So Jan, how did you feel about this idea when he proposed it?
At first I thought, well, gee, how much truth do I tell? Because I had a very dysfunctional childhood, extremely so. And then there were things in my 20s that I was not very proud about. I was basically a very disturbed young woman, and what you would call, no other word for promiscuous, and very ashamed of that. And due to my background, which was kind of weird, and I wondered if I was capable of telling the truth about it. But as a single mother, I mean, I was so at first very frightened when I realized, my marriage we were not going to last. Marty and I were married 17 years. But in those years, I had Sean, my oldest son, at 38, which was considered to be old, and then Jared at 41. So it was a monumental decision for me and my husband, but more for me because he had previous children, and the love that I felt for my sons just as all-encompassing for me, and always has been. So it was hard those years being a single mom and working and trying to survive and on a secretary's salary. But I think it made a better person of me, and it made better people of them. And the father was not an absentee parent. Don't want you to misunderstand that. He was there on the weekends and always there for them. He was quite a wonderful man. We just couldn't make it together. But I was just afraid that I wouldn't have the ability to tell the truth, but somehow I did.
You did.
So I survived.
So Jared, how did you decide, like when you were conducting these interviews, did you have kind of a structure in mind? Were there things you really wanted to ask about first, or did it kind of organically happen?
Yeah, it's interesting. So we had talked, both of us, before we started recording, and we decided we wanted to structure it, the book, as sort of this almost two parallel universes. Because I always wondered, if I'd met my mom when she was, 25, 30, what would she be like? I just feel like a lot of kids wonder that, right? Like, what would my mom be like? What was her life like? And so we decided to sort of think about it in those sort of chapters, basically, of our lives: childhood, dating, teen years, marriage, divorce, grief. And so we knew we had that basic structure down. And then so when we sat down, we said, okay, this is childhood. This is, this is animal welfare, which is one of the topics. This is politics. And then we went from there. My mom, as you can tell, she's a great ability to riff. And so it wasn't hard to kind of, Jewish New Yorkers, if anyone's listening, they tend to be pretty good at talking. So it wasn't hard to have her go off. I think sometimes we had to, so there had to be some editing afterwards, but we were able to, I think, to get at a lot of the issues pretty organically. Yeah.
And you were just sort of like having little recording sessions in your kitchen, or
right. Yes. This process took 2 years actually, to do. And so we would do, 30, 45 minutes about childhood. And then we would come, do the next chapter 2 weeks later, a month later. And then sometimes we discovered things, but yeah, we were just recording on our iPhone, on a good voice memo, and kind of going that way. And I was just it was taking me a long time to edit because I was my own editor. So I had to listen, edit, and then, obviously make sure everything made sense. So I definitely recommend if folks are going to do this to find a quiet place and then try to have some structure so at least you can organize it later.
So you have a film background. So I'm kind of curious, if you had thought about doing this as a film or an audio documentary before a book, or if it always was going to be a book.
Yeah, it's a great point. I love film. We did a documentary when Nate and my husband and I got married in 2015 about our marriage, and my mom was in it a little bit, and Nate's mom, Susie, was in it. And so I felt like we had covered some of that territory visually. There was still a lot more I think could be covered. So we talked about doing maybe a short film or something, either based on our relationship or our lives in a visual form. But no, I'd always felt like a book would be a great way to go. What I struggled with, I don't know if you felt this way, but when I started sort of trying to write it as prose before we interviewed, it was tough. Like, it was just tough to figure out where to start and where to go. But us being able to talk, I think, allowed us to just be frank and open and not feel pressured of, how this is going to sound or what people are going to think.
Yeah, and I think the fact that he narrowed it down into subjects, because otherwise I would have rambled off somewhere, and just lost the thread. But the fact that we did it in subjects, I think, helped us a lot to keep it together, and then went over it again and again. So that helped an awful lot. Yeah, absolutely.
Were there moments in the interviews that really surprised either of you?
Yeah, there were a lot of moments. My mom's pretty much, to use a pun, an open book, as you can tell. But there are many things I didn't fully know. Like, I didn't know, for example, my mom's brother, Barry, who unfortunately passed away, who struggled with mental health issues. I'd met him when I was younger, and I have vague memories of him. But I didn't know, obviously I didn't know my mom when she was younger, and she was 20, 21, or when he was, 18, 17. So I didn't know about this cross-country trip they basically took, and they lived in LA near the Grammys Chinese Theater, right?
Yes, that's right. Block off. He was 17 and I was 20, not quite 21. And my grandparents had given us some money, and we came out here.
From New York?
Yes, from New York. We went to Yosemite and Grand Canyon. And I wanted to stay out here so badly, but I got a job, which is now, I understand, no longer exists, at J.W. Robinson in Beverly Hills. And I used to take 4 buses or something to get there in the lingerie department. And we tried to stay because we loved it so much, but we just couldn't afford it. And he, unfortunately, he was schizophrenic. But in those years, it was just the beginning of the Vietnam War in the 60s. And the Navy took him in, which was a big, big mistake, but they would take anybody. So that was, I stayed here a year longer, and then my mother insisted I come home. I was very much under the control of my mother, which is a whole other chapter.
Yeah, and so there's a lot, like those stories, I didn't know the details about it. I didn't know that she was, who she was dating and what her life was like, where she was working, and I was able to sort of do research, and sure enough, her memory is just spot on. I could find all these places that she lived or she worked. So that was really surprising to me. Was there something surprising to you that stood out?
Yeah, I also had my first love affair.
Oh,
so and that was a surprise. I was very young, and so when my mother
surprised yourself,
I surprised myself then too. So it was quite. I was quite in love with California, but my mother wanted me to come home, and I began to realize, I'm just not going to make it here, and without any money, it's pretty tough to live in California or any place else. But it was the beginning of the learning experience. Yeah. So
was there something about me that surprised you when we did the book?
Something about you? No, I wasn't surprised because I always said when Jared was a little boy, because my older son was pretty much at those years an open book. I knew he was extremely bright, and I always leaned towards science even as a kid. 3-4 years old. I mean, so it seemed to me that he was just what you saw was what you were going to get. But Jared, I always used to say there was a secret place in him that I couldn't reach. And so sometimes began to think that perhaps he might be gay, but then I would push it aside. Not that it bothered me. It didn't bother me at all. It was just like, we're all different and we all seek different things in life. And as long as, because my childhood was so devoid of love that I was happy for Jared and Sean is given up looking, which I'm not happy about. But,
Jewish mother's nightmare for sure.
Jewish mother's nightmare. Yeah. But Jared just always kept part of himself to himself, and I knew there was something more to him, but I couldn't find it until when I read his journal, which he had written in Africa, and he said I could read it. I just didn't read the journal. So then what I suspected was, indeed so. And you were very angry at me.
At the time, yeah.
Yeah, at the time he was furious with me. But we made up in a day. I mean, it was not anything, that we couldn't overcome, because I think I love my son so much and they love me. That's just basic in my life. Yeah, absolutely.
That's not a surprise.
No, yeah. Not at all. You're right.
Yeah.
Not at all.
Yeah. But no, I do think there's a lot to discover. And I do recommend people do this because, my dad passed away, I guess, 5 years ago.
5 years now, yeah.
From dementia. And he was in his 80s. But I remember the last few years of just spending time with him, I was able to sort of cherish those moments. So I think it's sort of a balance we play in life, right? We're thinking in the future and we're also hopefully trying to live in the present. And so I think people should take time with whoever they love, whoever they want to know more about, to just document that. Because you also never know who it's going to affect, who might pick up our book and be hopefully positively affected by that story.
Right, because as a child, I was always ashamed of my family because it was so dysfunctional. And my quote unquote few what I consider to be normal girlfriends, I when I began to think about it, well, they weren't as dysfunctional a family as mine, but then again, I would think, well, how do I know? I don't live with them. I just know the crazy family that I live with. But you never know. I mean, and I always kept no one ever met my father because he was never around. He was working, and I was ashamed of him. And then at 16, I found out from my mother that he wasn't my real father. I mean, hello, so what? Surprise. And I did meet my real father for one night at the Latin Quarter in New York City when I was 16. And my mother was quite the girl, and she had a boyfriend. And we got into the cab, and she said, well, what do you think of him? I said, well, what do you want me to think of him? I just met the guy. But I said, but I like your boyfriend more. So that's how crazy my family was. So nothing surprised me, and Jared never knew that. I mean, I
never knew the details of that. And we found a photo of it recently, her literally at 16, sitting across from this man who was her real father, who she never really knew.
What was I supposed to do with that? Hello, Dad. I mean, you never raised me, so he was a nice man who at least he was good looking. Maybe I got some of those genes, but that was about it.
Right. No, but I do vividly remember, I think I was maybe 16 or 17. You said we were in the car. This is how my mom works, right? A lot of people will probably relate to this, but we were in the car and, she's like, there's something I need to tell you when you turn 18. And I said, why don't you just tell me now? And she said, okay. And so she told me that her, my grandfather was not my real grandfather. And so that her father was, that she basically never knew her real father, her biological father. So yeah, anyway, that was sort of I guess this book was many years in the making, but that was one of the precursors.
So, obviously, it probably wasn't part of your plan for this book to come out during a pandemic, but this is the world we live in.
Right.
But I do think it actually is quite a fitting book to be published during the pandemic because we are all trapped at home and we're far from our loved ones, or much too close to our loved ones,
Right.
depending on the situation.
Right.
But it seems to me like this is a really good opportunity for people to kind of pursue some of these family stories and have some of these conversations that, you know, in the kind of hustle and bustle of like non-pandemic life you don't have time for. So I'm curious if you guys, having gone through this process already, have any sort of tips or suggestions for people who might be pursuing a similar project?
Yeah, I know. I think we have a lot of tips. I mean, one is, first of all, pace yourself. I remember when I tend to be, you know, maybe an overachiever sometimes. I'm just, you know, I was thinking, okay, we'll get this done in, you know, 3 months and we'll get it out. You know, and that it took us 2 years because there's a lot there. And I think no matter, especially if it's someone that, you know, it's your mom or your dad or someone you really, obviously there's a lot to unravel and a lot to dive into. So I'd recommend pacing yourself. I think also, you know, candor is so important, right? And depending on the relationship you have with your parent or your spouse or whoever you're interviewing, I think setting some ground rules that, okay, let's be as honest as we can be here, because then you know there's a chance again you may never know, and that was a big, I think, fear for me too, that turned into a positive action, which is I want to know these stories and I want to be able to have them documented. So the candor was really important, which wasn't hard to get from my mom.
No, yeah. The thing is that when I began to think about you know, my young adulthood, that kind of, as I said, made me have second thoughts. Well, are you going to tell the truth? And I decided, well, I have to, because how would he know really that much about me? And when he thinks I get morbid, but when I'm no longer here, when I'm dead, and gone, he has a history. Both my sons have a history. I mean, unfortunately, my other son couldn't participate because he lives in Florida, but we included him in our thoughts, of course, and what we felt and how we know how he felt about certain things, or does. But you have to be honest. If you're not going to be honest, then it's not going to be a true book. So you have to really look at yourself and say, am I going to admit this or say this and come out with it? And then you create a genuine story of your life. And then, of course, your sons or daughters or whomever, spouses, they understand more, and maybe that will help them out in their lives. That's what we're hoping. It will help people out, that if your family is dysfunctional, you're not alone. There are
Right.
lots of us who are dysfunctional, you know, in a great sense, some more than others. But yeah, be honest about it. Be honest. Be real.
Mm-hmm. That's
Yeah.
good advice. So now that you've the book is out in the world, what are some of the takeaways that you have from this whole process of putting it together, and or what are some hopes that you have for the life of this book now that it's kind of left your family home?
Yeah, I takeaway from me is I think this is one of the most meaningful things I've done. I mean, as a creative person, you know, I need to be creative to live. But of the creative projects I've done, this has been just incredibly meaningful for me personally, and I think it will be, as my mom said, for, you know, our entire family and potentially other families who read it. I hope what it does for folks is it ultimately just, it moves and enlightens, you know, in whatever way it can. Hopefully people find something that they can relate to and hear, that may inspire them to open up and sit down with someone they love, and really ask them, you know, some sometimes hard questions about their background and their relationship. But I also hope it's, you know, a testament to the power of family and that bond. I mean, that's what we put in the title, Believe in You. It's something my mom always has said to me for as long as I can remember, which basically means never give up, and believe in your potential and who you are. But at the same time, it's really been that bond that we have and our family's bond that has endured. And, you know, we talk about in the book, there's some times when I was a teenager where I was, you know, rebelling and was saying things like, you know, our family's so small, like it's only you, me, and, you know, my brother basically most of the time, like we don't have a lot of extended family that we see. And my mom always reminded me, but it's our family and it's precious and you should value that. So whatever your family is, I hope that people take some time to really, to value that bond and explore that bond.
Yeah, and to be honest about it, because there's things that you don't have to like either about the person, even the person you love. That's true too. And I know sometimes I go off a little bit about different things, and maybe some things that are outrageous. But I know my sons accept me for me, and that's a great thing to feel that way. That people accept you, and particularly people that love you or care about you. I mean, including good friends, that they accept you for who you are and not for who perhaps they would like you to be. So I think that also this book is a revelation about that. That is a very special thing, to be accepted for whom you are.
Yeah, that is a great point. Because I think that not every gay kid, not every LGBTQ kid, not every kid who's different has that from their mother or their parents, and that's something I was really lucky to have. So I also did want to share that story of acceptance and love, which hopefully will maybe spread a little more joy and love in the world if folks read it.
Yeah. Well, thank you both. Is there anything else you want to talk about that I haven't asked about yet?
The only thing I thought that I had covered, which is so pertinent for today, is about grief and loss because of COVID. And in my life, I had lost 3, 4 really of the most important people in my life in a series in 6 years. And I did write about it, but the toughest one, I lost my mother in 94. She'd been in a coma for probably 6 or 7 months. So I thought I was prepared for it. But in fact, we had to go to court, my father and I, to get her off the machines because my father didn't want to have that done. And that was one issue we finally did get her off. And then I lost my best friend, Sue, who she died in 95. But the most hardest one was losing my brother, who died in 99. He was 53 and he was a schizophrenic. And I say to Jared, the story, all very painful his life was. And I just lived through that. And then my father died in 2000, and I wasn't very close to him because I hardly knew him. But still, my father's death a year later was not that tough because we had been estranged for so long. But I saw you, meaning Sean, meaning Jared, you and Sean crying. I was at the funeral and I was so shocked. And I thought to myself, well, of course, you were a better grandfather than you were a father. So that realization came over to me. So loss is something that we all go through, and more people are going through it now. And I remember, and I've written it in the book, that I just got through it, but it's like every day was a numbness in my heart for the people that I had lost and loved in one form or another. So my heart goes out to the people who've lost so many people now, in all over the world, not just in this country.
Yeah, no, I think that section of the book, we knew it would be difficult, and it was. It was difficult. But I think it was, again, also important to do it, because a lot of times, I think at least in American culture, we don't always talk about loss and grief and death in an honest way. And for me, it just taught me a lot about my mom's, courage and strength. As she says, she lost really 3, 4 people that were very close to her in, 5, 6 years. So it showed me just that idea of fortitude and strength and courage and overcoming grief, but also confronting grief. Like, I think it's something that we shouldn't run away from. So I definitely learned a lot from that, and reflecting on my dad, the loss of my dad, like I feel just grateful that my mom's been here to have hopefully people who are going through loss right now have someone or multiple people that they can be with and can console them and be with them.
Yeah, I like the mission of this book, which seems to me to be like, reach out to the people in your family, ask them questions, share your life with them, because you never know what might happen.
Yeah, you don't know, and it's that is the, I like to say, that's the bargain we make by living, right? We're not here forever, and COVID has reminded us that we never know what's around the corner. So while we have this time at home, in between maybe some bickering and fighting, if that happens with your loved one, I think it's nice to spend some time to really just sort through everything, and be there for one another. I know, like, for example, when my dad passed, my husband and my mom and my family, like that was everything for me. And I think spending this time in the book was really, as you said, a kind of a revelation. It was a way to sort of confront those feelings.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you both so much for sharing this project with our listeners. And I hope the book finds a big audience out there in the world. And I just wanted to check before we say our goodbyes. Do you have future collaborations planned? What else is next?
Yeah, no, we love to do more. And first of all, people can buy the book on Amazon. Believe in You. It's believeInYouBook.com, or just search for it on Amazon. I think we were just talking today, we hope to add maybe some future chapters of undiscovered territory. For example, entrepreneurship. We both have an entrepreneurial streak, which I learned about through this book and writing it. So there's other chapters we might add. So stay tuned for that, and maybe other projects together.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, maybe some short films together.
Wow.
Yeah.
Power team.
Yeah.
Dynamic duo.
Yeah, this is the team. This is the superhero team.
All right. Well, it's been such a pleasure talking with you both today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having us.
Enjoyed talking to you very much.
All right, listeners. So you heard it here. The book is Believe in You, A Family's Journey of Life, Love, and Loss. And our guests today were Jared Milrad and Jan West. Thanks again, both of you, and take care. And we'll have you in the store someday soon, I hope.
We'd love
Okay,
that.
that'd be great.
All right. We'll catch you on the flip side, everybody.
Thank you for listening to the Skylight Books podcast series. Please don't forget to visit our website at SKYLIGHTBooks.com and make sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Also, don't forget to subscribe to this podcast for more author talks and bookseller conversations. You can find us on Podbean, iTunes, and Spotify. Stay safe and healthy, and we hope to see you back in our store soon.
I see